I found an old book at my house, boys and girls, that's called Stories to Remember, and it was published in 1967. It's old. The pages are yellowed around the edge, and it's a book of short stories, but there's one story in here I could not believe. It's called The Fun They Had, and it's written by Isaac Asimov. He was a Russian from Russia, but he came to America. But the man was born in 1920, so if he were still living, he'd be 100 years old. But he wrote this before 1967 because that's when this book was published. So, and it, since it's a collection of short stories, I don't know when he wrote it. But listen to this story. This is amazing. There's a little beginning note. Have you ever found school boring? Does the idea of education by TV at home appeal to you? Imagine yourself living in the year 2157. Now remember, fifth graders, we've talked about science fiction. Okay, this is a science fiction story. The year 2157. You have it school in your own home on a TV screen. Sound familiar? Margie even wrote about it that night in her diary. On the page headed May 17, 2157, she wrote, "Today, Tommy found a real book." It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him there was a time when all stories were printed on paper. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way they were supposed to on a screen, you know. And then when they turned back to the page before, it still had the same words on it that it had had the first time they read it. Tommy said, "What a waste. When you're through with this book, you just throw it away, I guess. Our television screen must have had 1,000,000 books on it, and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away." "Same with mine," said Margie. She was 11, and she hadn't seen as many telebooks as Tommy had. Tommy was 13. "Where did you find it?" she asked. "In my house." He pointed without looking because he was busy reading. "In the attic." "What's it about?" "School." Margie was scornful. "School? What's there to write about school? I hate school." Margie always hated school, but now she hated it even more. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she had been doing worse and worse, till her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the county inspector. He was a little round man with a red face and a whole box of tools with dials and wires. He smiled at Margie and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Margie had hoped that he wouldn't know how to put teacher back together again, but he knew all right, and after an hour or so, there it was again, large and black, with a big screen on which all the lessons were shown and the questions were asked. That wasn't so bad. The part Margie hated the most was the slot where they had to put their homework and test papers. She always had to write them out in punch code that they made her learn when she was 6 years old, and the mechanical teacher calculated the mark in no time. The inspector had smiled after he was finished and patted Margie's head. He said to her mother, "It's not the little girl's fault, Mrs. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared a little too quick. Those things happen sometime. I've slowed it down to an average 10-year level. Actually, the overall pattern of her progress is quite satisfactory." And he patted Margie on the head again. Margie was disappointed. She had been hoping they would take away the teacher altogether. They had once taken Tommy's teacher away for nearly a month because the history sector had blanked out completely. So she said to Tommy, "Why would anyone write about school?" Tommy looked at her with very superior eyes. "Because it's not our kind of school, silly. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds and hundreds of years ago," he added lawfully, pronouncing the word centuries ago. Margie was hurt. "Well, I don't know what kind of school they had all that time ago." She read the book over his shoulder for a while and then said, "Anyway, they had a teacher." "Sure they had a teacher, but it wasn't a regular teacher. It was a man." "A man? How could a man be a teacher?" "Well, he just told the boys and girls things and gave them homework and asked them questions." "A man isn't smart enough," said Margie. "Sure he is. My father knows as much as as my teacher." "He can't. A man can't know as much as a teacher." "He knows almost as much, I betcha." Margie wasn't prepared to dispute that. She said, "I wouldn't want a strange man in my house to teach me." Tommy screamed with laughter. "You don't know much, Margie. The teachers didn't live in the house. They had a special building, and all the kids went to the special building." "All the kids learned the same thing?" said Margie. "Sure, if they were the same age." "But my mother said a teacher has to adjust to fit the mind of each boy and girl that it teaches, and that each child must be taught differently." "Just the same, they didn't do it that way then. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the book." "I didn't say I didn't like it," said Margie quickly. She wanted to read the book about those funny schools. They weren't even half finished when Margie's mother called. "Margie, school." Margie looked up. "Not yet, Mama." "Now," said Mrs. Jones, "and it's probably time for Tommy, too." Margie said to Tommy, "Can I read your book sometime with you about that school?" "Maybe," he said nonchalantly. He walked away whistling, the dusty old book tucked under his arm. Margie went into the schoolroom. It was right next to her bedroom. It was always, and the mechanical teacher was waiting on her. It was always on the same time every day except Saturday and Sunday, because her mother said little girls learn better if they learned at regular hours. The screen was all lit up, and the screen said, "Today's arithmetic lesson is on addition of proper fractions. Please insert yesterday's homework in the proper slot." Margie did so with a sigh. She was thinking about the old schools that they had when her grandfather's grandfather was a little boy. All the kids from the whole neighborhood came, laughing and shouting in the schoolyard, sitting together in the schoolroom, going home together at the end of the day. They learned the same thing, and then they could help each other on their homework and talk about it. And the teachers? They were people? The mechanical teacher was flashing on the screen. "When we add the fractions 1/2 and 1/4. Margie was thinking about how the kids must have loved it in the old days. She was thinking about the fun that they had. They said that was 2157, but this is 2020. And here you've been with your nose buried in a screen, and you've not had mechanical teachers. You've had all of us teachers. A mechanical teacher wouldn't love you. We teachers love you so much. And that's been the hardest part about the last 10 weeks. We haven't been able to see you. We haven't been able to answer your questions. We haven't been able to see how you're doing. And we've prayed and prayed for you and prayed that everybody was going to be just fine. And we are. Mr. Auclair has had a saying in our family ever since we got married. And his saying goes, "Tough times don't last, but tough people do." You and I are tough. And we're going to get through these tough times. Fall's going to come, and we're going to all come right back. Get in that wonderful classroom with your wonderful teacher that loves you so much, and Mr. Dowdy He's always thinking of fun things for you to do in his fun chapel times with you. Been an interesting year, hasn't it? Maybe we're living in a science fiction time. Mr. Asimov didn't realize that he was almost describing what we're going through, except your teachers have made your videos with love out of their heart for you. And I hope summer will go really quickly, and I hope by fall all of this science fiction, it almost seems like Twilight Zone, doesn't it? That all of this coronavirus will be behind us. I hope we'll have learned what God has for us in this situation. I hope we'll be back to church really, really soon. And we sure do love you, boys and girls. Happy summer.